absolutely zero clickbait here whatsoever. Blizzard just released a gigantic survey that they wanted to keep confidential with a whole bunch of new classes they're considering and they're planning to add soon to the game. They got the Tinker, the Bard, the Gunner, the Astrologian as their main choices, but a whole bunch of other interesting concepts as well. Most of these are Titan and cosmological themed, so this almost confirms that the new class is coming in Midnight and or the Last Titan. However, it gets really good. They're considering the Witch Doctor, the Necromancer, the Battlemage, the Warden, and even a Sargeras based class. So this not only reveals a lot of their internal development, but some of these concepts are so crazy and looks like we actually got a ton of things back in store. So let's cover this survey because there are 20 class concepts Blizzard is currently juggling around and they're explaining all of them. Did you know you can play the War Within directly on your phone with Awesome, this video's sponsor? You can control your desktop from your phone completely free, which is perfect when you don't really want to sit at the computer. Super easy to use, just use my link, download the PC and the phone app and just connect them. The free version is great, you can control your desktop, but the real deal is the game version with custom keyboards for various games such as WoW with great FPS and sound. Make sure to use my code DORON to get 7 days completely free so you can try it out only for the first 200 people. They also got a smart lock to turn off your PC at any time, as well as hot sales with up to 40% off on Pro and Game versions. Check out Awesome. So, at least they made a video and everyone was going on about how it's crazy. There's no way Blizzard is going to add a new class and Thinkers are just a pipe dream. But lo and behold, Blizzard sent out a survey, a small scale one in German this time, to test out the waters and what new class people want to see and what they would be interested in. And let me just say that the Tinker is at the top of the list, but there are so many classes that you wouldn't have even thought Blizzard is actually considering. So I'm really not going to go crazy here on my own thoughts, as there is so much information, official information to cover. So let's talk about what Blizzard actually has in store for us in the future. As I said, this is their official survey, so not like some maybe could be interview, but what's actually going on. So at the start they ask which of these classes would you want to see come next and what role would you want to see, and they give us a brief description of what they have in mind for these classes so that we're not just guessing based on the name. The first is of course the Tinker, and I talked about this one being so likely because we're getting a giant goblin patch, a giant goblin city, we're getting cars, we're getting new technology. We recently learned that Mechagon is still active and creating new mechanomes, and we have the Horde and the Alliance, the perfect parallel for a Tinker. Plus, it would also be a unique class, something unlike anything we had ever seen before. However, based on this, it does seem like they're planning these for Midnight and the Last Titan, based on the descriptions. The reason I say this is because the 4 classes that they currently have in mind are all based on the cosmology, the Song of Azeroth and such, and they're very World Soul Saga themed. It seems like the Tinker, Bard, Gunner, and Astrologian are the 4 new main classes that they really want to test out the waters for, and the most likely new concepts. The translation that we have for the Tinker is a little bit weird. It's not so much on the gadgets, but more on the Titanic power. They have this concept called Prismatic, where it's all about cosmic powers, merging them into one, refining life magic to heal, using order magic to protect, and merging death and shadow to deal damage. The Tinker here we're seeing is not really a rocket flying, mech suit, gun shooting class, but like a mage that is mixing all the 6 cosmological forces into one. They call them the heirs to Titan power, so it really seems like they're heavily considering this as a Last Titan feature. It isn't really a goblin gnome class that they have in mind. Next, they have the famous option, the Bard, which is, as you would imagine, they call this a support, healer, and tank class that is utilizing the Song of Azeroth to cast spells. They're primarily a support class, but they can also use it to tank and attack. I think the angle they're going here are not the singers or whatever, but they're really based on the powers of Azeroth's World Soul. Kind of similar to Magni, and being like this the Azeroth class, I feel like this might actually be connected to the Haranir that we're going to discover soon, as we learn that they're the primary followers of Azeroth as a goddess. Next option they have is the Gunner. Personally, this to me is a Tinker that I was thinking about, although a little less complex. It's quick, offensive DPS character that is like a mix between a rogue and a hunter, wielding 2 pistols and just being fast. They also utilize elemental magic to create a deadly arsenal of destructions. It really seems like they haven't really fleshed this one out. Lastly, of the 4 main classes they have the Astrologian, and this guy is heavily based on the World Soul Saga and the recent lore from the past few years, so I can totally see this as a very likely option, but a completely unexpected one, like no one actually saw this coming. It's based on the 6 cosmological forces, and this is a heavy cosmic one. They call them mighty spellcasters that use cosmic power of the stars and gravity to deal damage. They use celestial energies, manipulate the gravitational fields, and summon meteor swarms. So this really seems like an archmage, like a mage that uses all the powers of the universe, and based on this mix, I think this might potentially be related to the Arati, because we know they have their own philosophy of mixing various magics, and I think this is how they plan to introduce them, because the Arati have their own cosmology, so an Astrologian would totally make sense in their culture. However, as I said, these 4 right now seem to be the main options, but they say that some of the ones that I'm going to mention now are not really considered, maybe not in development, but they still want to see how people feel about them, and they want this to be kept confidential, which, as you can see, it totally wasn't. First, they mention an apothecary, which is an already existing class in WoW, heavily established, just not yet playable. Using potions and brews to harm enemies, empower and heal allies, they can be explosive, toxic, or empowering, but to me, this seems like a very interesting chemist Forsaken type class, especially the toxic version, and something that could totally be interesting. Next, they got the Witch, which seems kinda similar to Dark Shamans that we had seen in the past, DPS and healer class that uses old magic to reach dark and natural powers. They use curses, rituals, spirit connections, and decay. They mentioned that these are the Witches of Drastwar, the Gilnean Harvest Witches, the Decay Gnolls, and Troll Witch Doctors. Personally, this is one I would really like to see. It's so heavily established already in the lore, in the game, and I really think this would be interesting because almost all races have some versions of this, and Witch Doctors have been in Warcraft since Warcraft 3 with an incredibly interesting and unique abilities. So next they have is a Celestial Lancer, which is a completely new concept. These are apparently warriors that use spears and titan magic, empowered for quick jumps and strikes. These seem barely fleshed out and something heavily Last Titan themed. I'm guessing we're going to discover some crazy thing once we get to Northrend and why they're even considering a class called the Celestial Lancers. However, after this, we have the famous and the often requested battlemage that we had actually seen in the game, similar to Spellbreakers of the High Elves. They describe them as empowering their weapons with the might of elements to aid their allies, weaken foes, and to create constructs to control the battlefield. These do seem similar to mages, but I see it as heavily armored versions of mages. The same concepts of how you have priests and paladins, this will essentially be the paladin version of a mage. Next on the line is the Artificer, a melee-based tank DPS and healer that uses a mix of handmade machines and Titan technology, mechanic reactive gear, and reactive shields. This is a class that is on the front lines and a heavy combat class. To me, this sounds like the concept of the Tinker I was previously talking about, so I think they're definitely considering something like this. And also, do you notice how many of these classes are Titan themed, which makes it almost certain that they got a new class or two cooking for the Last Titan, and it's definitely going to be based on the Titan version of technology. Next, we have the Leyweaver, connected to the magical ley lines and the natural powers of Azeroth, which allows them to move quickly, manipulate the unseen energies that flows through everything. These are mainly a DPS class, but honestly, to me this sounds more like a mage spec. I don't really think they're seriously considering this type of a class. Next is kind of similar to this one, which is pretty much the same as the Gunner, and this one they only really talk about how they utilize 2 pistols and have a vision that allows them to see weak points, so a really early and not really well developed concept overall. Now the weird one though is the so-called Titan Killer, which I don't think would really be the official name, but these guys are using fragments of the Sword of Sargeras to connect the cosmic power of the Titans to destroy any threat to Azeroth. This one doesn't make much sense, but you notice how they talk about the power of Sargeras and the killing of Titans and defending Azeroth, which I feel like they may just be spoiling the storyline here a bit for the Last Titan, because as you may know, they're already working on the Last Titan as we speak, and this is the official information. But let's get into the real deal, the class, and that is the Necromancer. This is one of the most heavily requested classes since forever and super well established in the actual game. They're talking about how they can summon an army of the undead to follow commands, overrun enemies in combat. They combine different summoning spells to build a perfect undead army. They don't really describe much here, but let's be real, we don't really need much of a description, as this is the OG Warcraft class and what was actually heavily considered even back in Wrath before Death Knights. I think the only way this can happen is in Northrend. As we maybe get the remnants of the Scourge, we might find a way to utilize these undead to defeat the Titans, and I think this could be an amazingly interesting storyline and overall concept. Next, they once again mentioned the Tinkerers, but this time as I originally mentioned them, using mech suits, mechanical constructs, secrets of Titan technology, so I think they're definitely considering this, and I think they're looking at the Tinkerers from different angles, which to me makes it seem like the Tinkerer is the main concept they currently have in mind. Next, we got two more. We got the Wardens, which we all know back from Legion, armored hunters using devastating ranged and melee attacks, primarily a DPS class. Personally, I don't see this being that relevant, but we did recently learn that the Vault of the Wardens was renewed from the new book, so maybe they have something in store with the Wardens as well. They may return in a different shape or form. Lastly, we got the Spellbreakers, which are also the OG Warcraft 3 class. They're melee characters that are essentially counter to magical powers. They ward magic, they can empower their gear with the magic of their enemies. Personally, I would really want to see something like this, or like a battlemage, as this is a very unique high elven class that could totally be relevant in Midnight, as we are going into an elven expansion into revamped Quel'Thalas. Lastly, in the survey they ask a bunch more questions about how people would want to raid all of these, so overall, just to say, it's like 95% certain that at least one new class is coming in the World Soul Saga, potentially two as well. I think at the moment, the Tinker is the most likely plan, but also some version of a Cosmic Mage. I think they're really toying with uniting all the cosmological powers into one class and creating something like a Super Mage, which could and would be a really interesting concept, and I think this would all be based on the Arati. All the hints so far make it seem like this class would come in the Last Titan, but it could also happen at Midnight as well, so we may be looking at two new classes coming soon. Thanks for watching. Check out my video on all the updated BFA zones for the new book by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on Parents Like Mythology by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.